In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to turn your scrap clay into exquisite faux Murano beads. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to transform leftover pieces into vibrant, glass-like treasures that look straight out of Venice. Get ready for bold colors, beautiful shine, and a super satisfying clay technique. Hi, I'm Michaela from Learn Polymer Clay, and let's dive in. I'm starting with a few mixes, a pinkish metallic blend, which is made of fuchsia Fimo Professional polymer clay mixed with Cernit gold polymer clay in a 1:1 ratio. Then a second mix, which is a bright mix of yellow, fuchsia, and blue, and some pure fuchsia as well. I've also prepared a sheet of black clay that I passed on the setting number 8, a very thin setting of my Atlas pasta machine. Next, I've gently placed the thin black layer of clay onto my scrap clay, and then I trimmed off the excess. Then, because a little glam never hurts, I added a sheet of imitation gold metal leaf on top, and I gently pressed it into the clay. And this is where the fun begins. I grabbed my ethnic borders silicone mold by Lisa Pavelka, and I flipped it and I pressed my clay, the leftovers, with the gold leaf on top into this beautiful texture. Then I flipped the texture once more, and I used the roller to impress that design into the polymer clay. I removed some of the textured parts with a blade, and immediately I realized that I went too deep and I lost the metallic pattern that I actually wanted. And here's the look of some pieces made with the technique, with this technique when I made it right. But instead of giving up, I put the piece through the pasta machine a few times, ending with the setting number 8, and then suddenly the clay looked so much promising. At this point, I made another sheet of black clay, again on the setting number 8, and I started ripping tiny pieces of my new texture, my new mix, and I started building like a mosaic on top. You'll notice the pops of black I put in between. They create such a striking contrast later in the finished beads. I really like this effect. I could say that this part is relaxing, is playful, and honestly one of my favorite things to do with polymer clay. Plus, the crackled look of the metal leaf over the colored areas and over the black clay is beautiful. It's really beautiful as well. Well, after decorating the black clay with these tiny ripped off pieces, I've just placed some parchment paper on top, and I gently rolled everything together with the roller. Then I prepared a third sheet of black polymer clay, and this time I used the setting number 4 of my Atlas pasta machine. You could go lower, you could go to the setting number 5 if you want thinner pieces. And I used a leafy silicone texture to create a beautiful backing for my pieces. You'll have to apply some pressure with the roller, and then you'll just have to trim off the excess clay. And because the color sheet that I prepared and that I intend to put on top is quite larger than this textured clay, I cut it in half, and then I put it on top of the textured clay that I flipped previously because I want to have textured pieces on the back. And then I've used some more scraps from the initial scrap piece passed through the setting number 8 to decorate some to fill some gaps on the textured clay. And then you'll just have to use again the parchment paper and connect these layers together by gently pressing on the clay. You don't want to press too hard because you don't want to distort the textured, the leafy pattern that we've textured on the back of the beads. And then we are ready to go to the exciting part of the project, which is cutting out the beads. And since Murano glass beads come in very interesting and whimsical shapes, you'll find beads that look like birds, animals, butterflies, and so on and so forth. I chose a hummingbird cutter for the 2 focal beads. Then I decided to test a cutter that I already had in my stash, and I also used the slim elongated cutter to make 3 additional beads. And these shapes are great because they have like guiding lines, which makes it very easy to poke holes using a needle tool. And the clay looks so good at this stage that I recommend you to use every small cutter that you have in your stash, because you will end up with a whole collection of beautiful Faux Murano beads. Then you'll have to smooth off the edges, and when you are happy with the look of your pieces, you can bake them for 45 minutes in the preheated oven. I baked my pieces on parchment paper, and I'm also putting some metal leaf on top to protect them, to tent them and protect them from direct heat. And then you'll just have to let the clay cool down and check if you need to sand the margins. And I had to do a little bit of sanding in some areas. Then I thought a lot about how I wanted to connect these pieces, and I decided to use a metal connector and to arrange somehow the 2 hummingbirds on top of the metal connector, and also use one of the 3 elongated beads. But I didn't want to poke holes, so in order to build a backing, I decided to layer some black clay rolled on the setting number 5 of my Atlas past machine. And I've used a stamp with my initials to stamp the clay, and I cut 2 small round discs with a round cutter, and I'm going to use these round discs to sandwich the metal element in between 2 layers of clay. And of course, because we are putting together raw clay and baked clay, we have to use some liquid polymer clay. So I've used liquid clay and a brush, and I used the cutout elements to sandwich the metal element between the baked and the raw clay pieces. And I repeated the process to connect the elongated bead too. But for this elongated bead, I've of course used a smaller cutout piece of clay. You will have to decide how you are going to connect this pendant to the, in my case, to the metal chain that I intend to use. So I decided to open up a little bit the raw clay element from the hummingbird and placed a jump ring in between the raw clay and the back of the hummingbird piece. And then I used the partially dried out baby wipe to gently press this raw clay into the base. And when everything looks fine, and then you'll just have to put the pieces once more in the oven and bake them for 30 minutes this time. You'll have to let the clay cool down. And now this is where the magic really happens. We are going to use UV resin to spice up the design and to really create that beautiful faux glass effect. So I placed all the beads on a silicone mat, and then I've applied a quite generous amount of resin, but just enough to coat the pieces but without drippings, of course. You'll notice the colors instantly popping up, and even the black sections look deeper, and the whole surface is taking a very beautiful faux glass shine. You'll have to let the resin settle a little bit and check if you need to add more in some areas. And in order to pop up any air bubbles, you'll have to use a heat gun. And when you are happy with the look of the pieces with the resin on top, you can use a UV lamp and cure them. And of course, you'll have to follow your resin's manufacturer's instructions for the curing time. I cured my pieces for 6 minutes, and then you'll have to check on the back if you have any drippings and clean them with baby wipes and a little bit of rubbing alcohol. I hope you like how these beads turned out. I really like them, and for the final assembly I decided to use a heart-shaped jump ring to attach this pendant to a chain a chain that I previously decorated with purple crystal beads. And I decided to add the remaining elongated beads directly to the jump rings that I already had on the gold metal chain. And I think the finished neck piece is so vibrant, unique, and full of the faux Murano charm. Anyway, that's what I intended, and I really hope that you like this neck piece as much as I like it. And I really hope that you like this idea and that you'll use it in your work with clay. If you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to check out my other clay videos for clay techniques, and make sure to subscribe for weekly inspiration, and stay tuned for more inspiration for work with polymer clay. Thank you.